Both the opening and closing act of the Wii will involve a guy named Link trying to save a girl named Zelda. Yeah, it really has been 5 years since Nintendo released Twilight Princess, where we were first introduced to the now iconic Wii Remote and learned how these fangled motion controls were going to change the games we've been enjoying just fine with a regular controller for decades. Twilight Princess didn't really make that case very well, but to my pleasant surprise, Skyward Sword does. But first, the usual setup. Link, Zelda, and a great evil that must be stopped at all costs. You know the drill. Yeah, it's a little too familiar at this point, but Skyward Sword deserves some credit for taking the setting to a new place, the sky. Skyward Sword opens in Skyloft, a civilization far above the land of Hyrule, where citizens travel the clouds on birds called loftwings. As you might expect, Link's loftwing is special. And both Link and Zelda are quickly tangled into the predictable hand of fate. The relationship between Link and Zelda even has some real nuance this time, and some sexual tension. If you care one iota about the Zelda mythology, Skyward Sword is not to be missed. Unfortunately, Skyward Sword takes far too long before allowing players to roam free, throttling them with a lengthy tutorial that will, at best, frustrate players who already know what to do, and at worst, stop curious players from discovering the otherwise great game waiting just a few hours out. You might want to stretch a little bit, as your hand is really in for a workout. Waggling isn't going to get you anywhere in Link's latest adventure, and the very first enemies in the game will beat your ass to the ground to prove it. You must constantly react to the placement of the enemy's hands, as they're going to dodge left, right, up, and down over and over again to constantly throw you off. Ocarina of Time's Z-targeting changed how the industry approached combat in 3D. And what Motion Plus technology allowed Nintendo designers to do in Skyward Sword's combat is nearly as impressive. You're now part of the combat in a very physical way, rather than just mashing buttons. While it's too early to say it's impossible to imagine a Zelda game without motion controls, Nintendo has made a credible argument for why the series can definitely benefit from heading down that path. This all means Skyward Sword is quite literally the most engaging Zelda game yet. But don't worry, you can comfortably lay down on the couch just fine. With the exception of a little bit of wrist fatigue, I didn't have a problem reliably pulling off all the motions over the course of my 35 hours with the game. Motion Plus is also incorporated into the game's puzzles, some of which require players to twirl the Wii Remote around with very specific motions to move on. It's not overused, however, which is a pretty accurate description of the whole game. Like other Zelda games, there's some unwarranted backtracking to an old area that doesn't work as well the second time around. And you can cynically predict when the game is going to ask you to head out on yet another fetch quest. But what makes it all mostly okay is the dungeons you're being sent to are tremendously creative. The most impressive areas make use of time manipulation, allowing players to change the fate of a whole desert in real time, and swapping dungeons between the past and present to solve some truly devious puzzles. Skyward Sword works within the traditional Zelda structure, but the designers and artists have gone the extra mile to ensure you're doing things you've never done in a Zelda game before. If only so much attention had been paid to the game's upgrading and potion crafting system. Skyward Sword is not a particularly difficult game, and many of the upgrades are centered around giving you a more powerful shield, the ability to carry more items, or to have stronger arrows. Upgrades you don't really need if the game isn't that tough. It doesn't help that obtaining these upgrades requires fetching a bunch of random crafting items in the game world, and there's simply not much motivation to get it done. These are upgrades that would have normally been given out as treasure within a typical dungeon, and it simply feels like you're being asked to do more work for something that's not worth the trouble. It's hard to overlook other areas where Skyward Sword doesn't play catch-up too. It's unacceptable now that Link doesn't have access to any kind of quest log. Fi provides hints on where to go next, but she doesn't provide a database of side quests. Characters will have a conversation icon above their head if they have anything to say, but finishing that side quest is contingent upon you either resolving it then or coming back to it later. Mostly, I just never came back. It's also worth pointing out that any concerns about the Wii's aging hardware are rendered moot. Wind Waker still holds a place in my heart as the best-looking Zelda game, but Skyward Sword cleverly leverages the style of Impressionist paintings to craft a spectacular look all its own, and one that changes so subtly in real time that you'll quickly forget it's not in high definition. In an industry where most games are trying to look more realistic than the last one, indulging in Skyward Sword's colorful cast of weird guys and gals makes you very happy to leave the uncanny valley for a little while. Even if you're burnt out on Zelda games at this point, Skyward Sword is worth playing. I can't overstate how impressive the combat is, and it's changed my feelings toward motion controls. The game isn't without issues, and the traditional structure of the series is showing serious strain in light of the competition. But it's too bad this game didn't exist when the Wii was first launched. It might have changed a bunch of skeptics into believers.